It's a real pleasure to be here in Dubai to talk about these important issues. Thank you very much, David, for this introduction. The situation is indeed very worrying, and what we want to achieve here in this meeting is to try to raise awareness among scientists, among policymakers, but mainly among us scientists, about the situation, about the enormous risks posed by nuclear weapons. You've heard a very comprehensive introduction about the situation. I just want to give you some data and to set the stage for a discussion that I hope will be fruitful and trying to think and to lead to ideas. What can scientists do? This is the idea behind it. I will give you a couple of examples on what scientists have been doing in Latin America. Of course, Pugwash is scientists, the Pugwash conferences. But I want to also give you examples from other regions, in particular Latin America, since I'm from Argentina, on what scientists have been doing, but we don't see an equivalent action now by scientists and the general public. And this is what worries us. And I think Brian Schmidt, David Gross, and others and other colleagues, we have organized a couple of meetings last year, conspicuously one in Chicago I will mention, about what we can do. So we want to really think about how we can reach the public and governments to try to see how we can bring not only facts as scientists, but also the scientific rationale, the scientific way of thinking and of confronting problems. So the title is, what can we scientists do to reduce the huge and increasing risks posed by nuclear weapons? So this is a very provoking first slide, but I want to just begin with a very brief history. The first step, this is a picture of the first controlled nuclear chain reaction in Chicago, December 2nd, 1942, 3 years before the first atomic bomb was launched on Hiroshima and the second one on Nagasaki. This was a very interesting experiment where 45 tons of natural uranium, 400 tons of bricks of pure graphite as moderators were used, and cadmium-controlled rods. And this was interesting because it was the first experiment that really led to a controlled nuclear reaction in a fission nuclear reaction. But after this, then there was. So this led to the dual use of nuclear energy. Okay, so for peaceful and for the military uses. This is then produced a very beautiful piece of art by Henry Moore, the nuclear energy, where you have the nuclear explosion at the top and the nuclear energy, the peaceful uses at the bottom, like a structure for civilization. This was done for the 25th anniversary of the bombs. So let's go to the facts. The Trinity test. This was at the height of the Manhattan Project. The Trinity test was performed in New Mexico on the 16th of July, 1945, 16th of July. So it's 3 weeks before the bombs in Hiroshima. This was a 25 kiloton explosion. That was the yield of this atomic bomb, 25 kiloton. Kilo is 10 to the 3, ton is 10 to the 3. So it's 25 million kilograms of TNT. This was the first nuclear test that led to around 2,500 nuclear tests until 1992, where the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty I mentioned set a stop to nuclear tests. But now people, as David said, people are talking about resuming politicians' nuclear tests again. So then 3 weeks later, we had the bombs on Hiroshima on the August 6th, 1945. This one was a fission bomb, uranium-235, 15 kilotons. Remember this number, 15 kilotons. This is a small bomb, if we look at current magnitudes. It produced around 140,000 deaths. This is what Hiroshima looked like a couple of months later. 3 days later, August 9th, 1945, plutonium-239 bomb called Fat Man, 21 kilotons, so just 6 kilotons more. It caused 80,000 deaths in Nagasaki. This is Nagasaki after that bomb. So let's continue escalating this. There were many other intermediate, but these are the most relevant ones. So this is the US nuclear test, the Castle Bravo test at the Bikini Atoll in the Pacific. On March 1954, this was a 15 megatons, so it's 1,000 Hiroshima bombs. Remember, it was 15 kilo, this is 15 megatons. This explosion represents 1,000 Hiroshima bombs. This produced acute radiation symptoms in some fishermen that were there nearby. It was a famous Lucky Dragon fishing boat event, and this led to studies on the effect of the radiation of nuclear tests. So if there is a resumption of nuclear tests, there will be inevitably effects on the environment and on human beings, and this is where the whole research on the effects of nuclear tests began. Let's continue escalating, and this is the Tsar bomb. So it's a biggie one, also called that, performed by the Soviet Union in the Soviet Arctic, close to Greenland, in 1961. So this was a 58 megaton. So this is nearly a factor 4 of the previous one. So it's a factor 4,000 Hiroshima bombs. I'm saying this because, we are scientists, we understand magnitudes, but the general public doesn't understand that. They don't have that training. And when you tell someone, there is a bomb that it represents 4,000 Hiroshima bombs, they sort of stare at you and they say, well, yeah, okay, and so what? Yeah, 4,000 bombs. So the yield of this bomb was 10 times the total power of all bombs in World War II, including Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which are tiny bombs compared to this. So, of course, it includes Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So this is 10 times the total power of bombs during the Second World War. What did physicists do? So in July 1945, there were some responsible physicists, Eugene Rabinovich, James Franks, Leo Szilard, and others, that alerted Truman about the impossibility of keeping the discovery secret, the likeliness of the beginning of a nuclear arms race. They were right, and that nuclear weapons should not be used in warfare, but it was dismissed. It never reached President Truman, and they founded the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. Just a year before, Joe Rotblat resigned to the Manhattan Project. He was working there. He was the only scientist to resign on moral grounds. When he got to know that Hitler did not succeed in making the bomb, he said, there's no point in making the bomb, so I'm going to resign, because he wanted to stop the project, but Leslie Groves and the president did not agree. So he was a co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. This led to the Russell-Einstein Manifesto in 1955. Russell and Einstein, they wrote a beautiful manifesto saying that if we want to survive, we must learn to think in a new way, signed by 11 prominent scientists of the time, many Nobel laureates. You can see Hideki Yukawa, but many, Linus Pauling, etc. And the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, which I really recommend you to read, it draws attention on the enormous danger posed by nuclear weapons that are capable of destroying humanity. It urges governments to avoid war and to use dialogue to resolve conflicts. And it calls on a conference of scientists, and that led to the Pugwash conferences. It was Albert Einstein's last public act, because he signed the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, and he died in April 1955. So as a result of this, we had the Pugwash conferences were formed, and this is, they got the Nobel Peace Prize, as David said, for their efforts towards diminishing the role of nuclear weapons in international affairs and in the long run to eliminate nuclear weapons. And here we have Joe Rotblat and Francesco Calogero, who died 3 days ago. He was a very prominent physicist, so mathematical physicist, and he has many models after his name, but he was the Secretary General of Pugwash when they got the Nobel Peace Prize. So as an example, physicists, when I was a student in Bariloche in the Patagonia in Argentina, this is how I got into this, because the Brazilian Physical Society and the Argentine Physical Society got engaged in talks to try to avoid a nuclear arms race in South America. this was in addition to other, for example, as I said in the beginning, but this is what we did in Latin America. And they had a couple of statements, and that led to what is now a quadripartite agreement between Argentina, Brazil, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy, and Argentina-Brazil accountability and control of nuclear weapons. So this is one of it's a very important bilateral treaty to avoid nuclear weapons. So then this led also to discussion in the civil society that led to the Brazilian constitution being, I think, it's the only national constitution that includes a prohibition to develop nuclear weapons. It says in its Article 21, all nuclear activity in national territory will be used for peaceful purposes exclusively and under approval by the National Congress. I think this is very important. The Argentine Physical Society has, in its code of ethics, also it says that any conscious participation in nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction is considered a breach to basic ethical principles. So this is one of the very few, or the only physical society that includes such an article in its text. So where are we today? So this is the evolution in time. You see the years. This is the amount of nuclear warheads. 1945, it was 2 bombs, 3 bombs, and it was increasing. I don't know if I can point, but you see in maybe this, no, around the 1980s, the peak at the peak of the Cold War, we had 70,000 nuclear warheads, and then thanks to different a series of agreements, it went down to what we have now, which is approximately 12,000 nuclear weapons. This is a discrimination between the US in blue stockpile and the Russian stockpile in red. But look how useful international agreements were. But these international agreements are crumbling, so that's a problem now. The amount of nuclear weapons is more or less depicted here. Let me just show you this list. Russia has currently about 5,500 nuclear warheads, France 290, UK 225, to be increased for the first time to 260. The USA has 5,000. China had 410, but it has now increased to 600. Then these are the 5 nuclear weapon states. Then you have other nuclear weapon states declared but not permanent members of the UN Security Council. India and Pakistan with roughly 170, the DPRK, North Korea 50, Israel is estimated to have about 90. And then these are states that are umbrella states that have stored nuclear weapons. Belgium has 15 from the US, Germany 15 from the US. Italy has 2 sites, a total of 35 nuclear weapons from the US as part of NATO. Belarus apparently has nuclear weapons, but it's apparently not. I mean, it's not, but there have been talks. The Netherlands has 15, and Turkey has 20 nuclear weapons. To a total of 12,400 nuclear weapons. And what I want, this is an important number. The total yield of the current nuclear weapons is about 140,000 Hiroshima bomb equivalent. So we have 140,000 Hiroshima bomb equivalent in lead. I won't talk about the treaties because this is something we might discuss afterwards. Just to finish, this is a doomsday clock, so David was mentioning, and this is how the doomsday clock began in 1947, set originally in this, so 7 minutes before midnight, and this is how it went down, minimum. So this is the minimum was when the US and the Soviet Union tested hydrogen bombs. Then it had these oscillations, and the farthest it has been, so the best time in the nuclear weapons in history was in 1991 after the Cold War. But since the end of the Cold War in the 1990-91, we see a decrease, so an approximation to midnight. And now last year we were 89 seconds, now we are 85 seconds to midnight. So this is quite impressive. We have our colleagues working at the University of Chicago and at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists And they include nuclear weapons, but also emerging technologies like AI, synthetic biology, and climate change. So just to finish, I'd like to quote the Russell Einstein Manifesto, which says the lies before us. If we choose continual progress and happiness, knowledge and wisdom, shall we instead choose death because we cannot forget our quarrels? We appeal as human beings to human beings. Remember your humanity and forget the rest. If you can do so, the way lies open to a new paradise. If you cannot, there lies before you the risk of universal death. And this is literal. To finish, I'd like to stress, well, I don't know what happens, but so the words that we usually, so we always repeat as our mantra is, remember our humanity, remember your humanity, and I hope we can start a fruitful discussion on what to do to reduce this a huge risk, because there are additional problems with treaties, with threats that we want to discuss now in the round table. Thank you very much.